Bacik.
I'd like to welcome former Senators Maurice Manning and Joe Toole to the House again, and to thank the leader for organising the debate, following on the debate that we had on the 5th of May on the issue of Seanad reform, and in particular on the findings of the report of the working group on Seanad reform. And again, to commend you for producing the report, which I think we all would share in Senator Cummins' hope and expectation that this will be the last report on Seanad reform. And I do very much welcome the announcement that there will be an implementation group established in early course. I think that's long overdue. Indeed, it will be quite an achievement to get a bill through the Oireachtas before the general election, even if the implementation group is set up very quickly. I am somewhat concerned, and I think Senator Bryan is right, to hear that the Taoiseach is meeting the Dáil leaders today. I very much hope that Seanad group leaders will be met. That's not a matter for either of you, former senators here today, but clearly it would be important, I think, that the Seanad group leaders would also meet with the Taoiseach to discuss the timetable for reform. And I would also agree with Senator Cummins' sentiments in terms of the status of the Seanad and the importance to be ascribed to the Seanad, and the priority indeed to be given to the work of the Seanad. And Senator Cummins and indeed myself on the previous occasion have already spoken at length about the procedural changes we've made to the workings of the Seanad. We've spoken about the initiatives we've taken, for example, through having public hearings with interested groups and bodies on matters of public interest. And we've produced some excellent reports through that initiative. For example, most recently on farm safety, but also previously on lifestyle changes in terms of cancer prevention and indeed on human rights of elderly persons. So we've had a whole range of different reports produced through that new forum. We've also had, that's the Seanad Public Consultation Committee. We've also had, as Senator Cummins has said, a series of debates with MEPs, and we've made a number of other changes to the ways in which the Seanad works. So that's hugely important. And I would very much hope that there will be some representation from the current Seanad on the implementation group, and others have spoken already about that. And indeed, I've spoken previously about the lack of representation of serving senators on the working group. Having said that, as I pointed out previously, very few former or serving senators made submissions to the working group, and clearly that was open to anyone to do so. I did make a submission on behalf of the Labour Party senators, and I went through that submission in more detail with you on our previous occasion. Now that we're coming back again, and in light of the bill that you've published, the draft bill seeking to implement the recommendations you've made, I might refer some more to some of the changes that we propose that I think might give some sort of might be stronger in some ways than some of the provisions in the bill. But I must say that I think in general, the bill would make for, and the bill and the recommendations in the report would make for a hugely improved and a more democratic Seanad. So I would say that. I think that we may disagree on some of the detail, but I think that in general, the principle of extending the suffrage for the Seanad is a hugely important one. I think that there's actually an agreement on that across the House, on the need to extend suffrage. To what extent that's extended, whether, for example, it's extended to a diaspora, whether it's extended beyond the general election register to the local election register, as we had proposed in the Labour group. These are issues on which we can debate and which no doubt the implementation group will consider. And I would say, in fact, that the report I said on a previous occasion had somewhat glossed over how universal suffrage for the 30 seats would work in practice. Now, looking through the bill, clearly there is more detail in that, but there's still, I think, some issue about the university senators, which Senator Cummins raised, as to whether it's existing register for the current institutions initially, and then to extend to all higher education institutions. But I'm not quite clear, and I couldn't quite make that out in the bill, so I'd be grateful for clarification on that. In terms of the one particular issue I had, and I raised this the last time, and again looking at the bill, it's still an issue for me, which is this issue that you recommend in the report that for the universal suffrage, that individuals who elect to register will choose the panel of their choice, I think, of the vocational panels, and that university graduates may choose to remain on the university panel, to be eligible to vote in that panel, or transfer to one of the vocational panels. Now, my concern is that that could skew the panels. And looking at Section 8 in particular of your draft bill, I'm just concerned that it could lead, in the first instance, to very uneven numbers of electors or voters between each panel. And in the second instance, and sort of that would be just a sort of a fairly obvious consequence, that you might have 100,000 people opting to vote on the arts panel.
Wasn't in the universities.
Well, indeed, and I'm just coming to that. I mean, that's a very particular instance, is how many people would be eligible to vote on the university panel if it's extended to all higher education graduates. Between 500 and 700,000, I think, is the estimate. And that would be for 6 seats, whereas you might have just 100,000 on one panel. You might have, you know, very skewed numbers on different panels. And I think there's a further consequence possible from the proposal in Section 8. And again, I'm offering this in a constructive spirit, but I think it's very likely or very possible that people would organise registration campaigns on a particular panel to ensure their election on that panel. And I think the problem with just saying one panel, one vote or one panel, is that that would be a consequence, or a very likely consequence of it. And if I could say, I mean, I think we made a very brief submission, but I think in our submission we did think this through a little bit, that we suggested that each person entitled to vote would have a separate vote for candidates on each of the 5 panels, and that university graduates could opt for a vote on the university panel instead of just one specified panel, to try and militate against or guard against the skewing of voter numbers on different panels. And we argued that this would be like a multi-seat constituency. In other words, you'd have 5 votes on 5 panels, and obviously you'd vote 1, 2 and 3 on each of those panels, but it would just get over that problem of different numbers registering to vote for different panels. If you opted in to register in our system, you're registered for all of the panels. So I mean, these are, as I say, some of the details. Turning to one other issue that I didn't get to address in detail on the last occasion, but it's addressed in great detail in your report, and again is reflected in the bill. And this is the issue of use of online facilities, and I think you've made really excellent suggestions, if I must say, about facilitating more efficient downloading, more efficient registration first, that people can register online, or could register online in your method, and could also download ballot papers online. Clearly the Constitution requires ballot papers must be returned by post, and I know you make provision for that in the bill, but if people could register themselves online and download ballot papers online, clearly that is more efficient and effective. And if I could make one further suggestion, I think this could be applied to current panels of voters on the university seats, and something that I've been thinking about for some time. I think we should move to a system whereby those who are currently registered to vote on the Seanad register, that is graduates of NUI and of Dublin University, should be able, as you can in a general election, to check the register. You should be able to go to a website like checktheregister.ie. You know, currently people can check the register, but they have to go to look at the hard copy of the Seanad electoral register, which is available in the libraries of the various institutions within NUI, within Dublin University and so on. And the register is available for examination, I think, in the reception, the NUI register, in the reception of NUI offices. But there isn't a facility currently for people to check an online register. And, you know, I suppose, you know, since we were here last on the 5th of May, of course, we've seen the huge amount of people who came home to vote, having checked the register and seeing they were still eligible, but having lived abroad for a short period of time. We saw the huge strength of that home to vote campaign, but it relied on people being able to check the register. And it just struck me that that referendum on the 22nd of May really highlighted how important it is that people can check if they're registered. And I think whether one moves to the universal suffrage model here, or even just in respect of the 6 university graduate seats, we should have a mechanism for people to check a register online if they are registered for Seanad elections. So I want to make that pitch, and I'll be making it also to the appropriate minister. I think that'll be the Minister for Education. Clearly there is an online register available to those of us who are to public representatives, so it shouldn't be too difficult a system. There are security issues, but again, in the appendix to your report, you know, reading through it in detail from the NCSE, I think you've addressed a lot of the issues that would be of concern around security of online registration systems, and I think that would apply to existing registers for the university seats. So, so as I say, that's one very particular issue I didn't get an opportunity to address the last day, and it became more pertinent, I think, after the marriage equality referendum.
1 minute,
could I just say, I suppose, there's a lot more in the bill and in the report, and I wanted to just raise a couple of other points. The issue of giving councillors a continued say in a number of the seats for your reformed Seanad. That would be 13 seats, I think. I think that's a good idea to give councillors some continued say in the makeup of the Seanad. However, again, I would say we sought to address this in our own report or our own submission to you, where we suggested that one of the panels under the Constitution, in accordance with Article 19, that would be the Public Administration panel we recommended, could be reserved for election by City and County Council members to preserve existing link with local government, and therefore there would be no need to set aside as many as 13 seats to preserve that link. So I think there are other ways of achieving what I agree is a worthy aim, which is to preserve the link between local elections, between those who are elected locally, I should say, and the Seanad. And finally, on the same point, we recommended that if we were moving to universal suffrage, as we favour, that all those entitled to vote in the local election register should be entitled to vote in Seanad elections. The Dáil clearly is confined to those in the general election register. Using a local election register for Seanad elections would keep a link between local representation, local government and the Seanad, and would give us a broader franchise. I think the issue of diaspora votes, we do have diaspora votes already for the university seats. So there is an argument to say that that would be one way of extending the franchise without encountering the problems that others have addressed. But I must say, in principle, I do agree. I think it would be very positive to have votes for those who live abroad without the current restrictions that you can only live abroad for a very limited period of time while retaining your general election vote. Plenty more to say, and I'm sure we'll get more opportunities. And thank you very much for engaging with us today. Gurmagh.